The little boy waited at the train station. Then a soldier walked up. A little boy sat alone on the wooden bench at the quiet train station, his small hands gripping a satchel that looked far too big for him. The air smelled faintly of smoke and steel, the sound of distant locomotives echoing across the tracks. His legs swung nervously, shoes tapping against the iron bars of the bench, while his eyes darted every few seconds toward the arrival board. He was waiting. But for who, and for how long, no one around seemed to know. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. The station wasn't crowded that evening. A handful of travelers shuffled past, clutching bags, tickets, and hurried conversations. Nobody gave the boy more than a passing glance. To them, he was just a child sitting quietly, maybe waiting for a parent who had gone to buy something. But he wasn't. He had been there for hours, his small frame stiff from sitting in the same spot. The station master had noticed him once, asked him where his parents were, but the boy had simply said, "I'm waiting." There was no complaint, no tears, just those two words said firmly, as if that was explanation enough. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each minute passing like an eternity for the boy. He kept glancing down the tracks, as though any moment something important would appear. Whenever the whistle of an approaching train echoed, his heart jumped. He would sit up straighter, clutch his satchel tighter, and stare until the train rolled in. But each time the doors opened, and strangers stepped off with their chatter and tired expressions, his shoulders slumped a little lower. Still, he did not move. Travelers came and went, noticing the child but deciding it wasn't their concern. A woman in a thick coat dropped a coin in front of him, assuming he was begging. He didn't touch it. A businessman nearly bumped into him, muttered a quick apology, and walked on. None of them stayed long enough to see the look in his eyes, something far too old for his years, something that held both hope and sorrow. The boy reached into his satchel once, pulling out a small piece of folded paper. He unfolded it carefully, as though it might crumble from wear. Written in uneven handwriting, perhaps by someone in a hurry, were just a few words. "Wait at the station. I'll come back." His fingers traced the letters slowly, lips moving as he read them over and over. Then he folded the note again and slipped it back inside. The air grew colder as the evening deepened. The lamps along the platform flickered on, casting a pale glow on the boy's face. He tucked his hands under his arms for warmth, but his gaze never left the tracks. Somewhere inside, he believed the note. He believed that the person who had written it would step off the train and call his name. That belief was the only thing keeping him rooted to the bench. Every time a train screeched into the station, he leaned forward. His eyes searched desperately through the crowd, looking for a familiar face. Sometimes he thought he saw one, only for the figure to disappear into the stream of passengers. Each disappointment pressed on him heavily, but his determination didn't waver. He told himself he couldn't leave. If he left, he might miss the moment. And missing it was something he refused to risk. The station master checked on him once more, concern flickering in his tired eyes. "Still waiting, son?" he asked softly. The boy only nodded, clutching the satchel even tighter. The man hesitated, then walked away. Some things, he seemed to understand, were beyond his ability to solve. As the night stretched on, the boy's small figure remained a constant on the bench, like part of the station itself. Alone, yet waiting with a purpose nobody else could quite see. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. He just waited, with a patience far greater than his years, for the moment that he hoped was still to come. The whistle of another train pierced the evening air, and the boy's head snapped up with a sudden rush of hope. He pressed his small hands against the bench and leaned forward, eyes wide as the train rumbled into the station. The wheels screeched, sparks flashing briefly as the metal ground against metal, and then it slowed to a heavy stop. The boy's heart pounded so hard it hurt, and he rose halfway to his feet, clutching his satchel tightly against his chest. Doors swung open one after another. Passengers spilled out, some walking briskly as though the train had been too long, others dragging heavy suitcases, their expressions weary from travel. The boy's gaze swept across them frantically, searching every face. He looked for something familiar, someone tall, someone smiling, someone who would kneel and say his name. But as the crowd thinned and the platform quieted again, no one came. The boy sank back onto the bench, his satchel pressing into his lap. His lips trembled, but he bit down hard to stop them from shaking. He had promised himself he wouldn't cry. Crying wouldn't help. Crying wouldn't bring anyone back. So he just sat there again, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the empty doorways of the train, until they finally slid shut. With a loud hiss, the train pulled away, leaving behind only the drifting smoke and the silence that settled like a weight on his chest. The boy glanced up at the clock. The hands had moved again, ticking away another half hour. He didn't even realize how many hours had passed since he had first arrived. His stomach grumbled, but he ignored it. Hunger could wait. The person he was waiting for couldn't. A family walked by, 2 parents and a little girl clutching her mother's coat. The girl turned her head and looked at him curiously, slowing her steps as if she wanted to say something. But the mother tugged her along, too focused on keeping up with her husband. The boy watched them disappear, then shifted his gaze back to the tracks. He wondered what it would feel like to leave the station with someone's hand holding his. He adjusted his satchel and opened it just a little. Inside were only a few items: the folded note, a small toy soldier with faded paint, and a sandwich wrapped in paper that had long since gone dry. He touched the toy soldier gently with his fingertip, as though it could give him strength. Then he closed the bag again. The lights along the platform buzzed faintly, casting shadows that stretched across the ground. The boy curled his legs up onto the bench and rested his chin on his knees. He listened to the sounds around him, the murmur of a ticket clerk inside the station, the faint chatter of passengers leaving, the heavy chug of another distant train. It was as though the entire world was moving around him, while he stayed perfectly still, anchored by one single promise written on a piece of paper. A gust of cold air rushed through the station, making him shiver. He hugged his knees tighter and told himself again what he had been repeating all day. Don't leave. Don't move. Just wait. The person you're waiting for will come. The hours dragged on, each one heavier than the last. The boy's eyes burned with fatigue, but he refused to let them close. He thought of what he would say when the moment finally came, when the familiar figure stepped off the train. Would he run forward? Would he smile? Or would he just cry then, unable to stop himself? The boy didn't know, but he replayed it in his mind again and again. Another train's whistle broke the silence. The boy jerked upright once more, his heart racing faster than before. The sound of approaching wheels grew louder, and this time he whispered under his breath, almost like a prayer. Please, please let it be this one. He waited, every muscle in his small body tense, as the train rolled in and came to a stop. This time, he told himself, someone had to step off. This time, it had to be different. The boy sat up straighter as the train doors opened again, his small hands gripping the satchel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Passengers poured out, a blur of boots and coats and tired faces. His eyes darted from one person to the next, his breath quickening. Each figure that stepped onto the platform could be the one. Each face that appeared through the doorway made his chest ache with expectation. But one by one, they walked past him, never slowing, never turning, never speaking his name. Then, just as the stream of passengers began to thin, a tall figure appeared in the doorway. The boy froze. The man was dressed in a uniform, the kind he had seen in photographs. A soldier. His boots were worn, his shoulders broad, and his expression carried the heaviness of someone who had seen too much. As the soldier stepped down onto the platform, his eyes scanned the station almost absent-mindedly, until they landed on the boy. For a moment, the boy couldn't move. His chest felt tight, and he clutched the satchel even harder. The soldier didn't look away. He slowed his steps, his gaze fixed on the small figure sitting so still on the bench. Something softened in his face, something that looked almost like recognition, or maybe it was just concern. The boy's heart pounded. He wanted to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. He wanted to speak, but his throat felt dry. All he could do was stare back at the man in the uniform, as though the entire world had gone silent around them. The soldier adjusted the strap on his shoulder and began to walk closer. Each step echoed against the platform, steady and deliberate. The boy's eyes followed him, wide and unblinking. Other passengers moved around them, some leaving the station, some rushing to board the next train, but it felt as if the two of them were caught in a space apart from everyone else. When the soldier finally stopped in front of the bench, he lowered himself slightly, enough to look the boy in the eye. His voice was calm, steady, but edged with curiosity. "What are you doing here, son? Are you waiting for someone?" The boy swallowed hard and nodded once. His lips parted, but no sound came. He tried again, his voice soft and uncertain. "Yes, I'm waiting." The soldier tilted his head, studying him more carefully now. The boy's clothes were clean but worn, his shoes scuffed, his cheeks red from the cold. He was too young to be alone in a place like this, too young to carry the kind of look he had in his eyes. The boy shifted on the bench, hugging the satchel closer to his chest. He wanted to say more, to explain why he was there, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he looked down at the ground, afraid that if he met the soldier's gaze too long, he might break. The soldier didn't press. He sat down on the bench beside him, his heavy boots scraping lightly against the platform. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the station carried on around them, the hiss of steam, the clatter of footsteps, the faint rumble of another train in the distance. But between them, there was silence, a silence that felt strangely safe. Finally, the boy risked a glance at the man sitting next to him. The soldier was staring at the tracks, his jaw tight, as though his thoughts were far away. Yet his presence felt solid, steady, something the boy hadn't felt all day. The boy whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "I'm waiting for my dad." The soldier turned his head slowly, his eyes softening. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. He just studied the boy, the weight of his words settling heavily between them. And in that moment, without even knowing his name, the soldier understood more than the boy realized. The boy's words hung in the air, fragile and heavy at the same time. "I'm waiting for my dad." He didn't look at the soldier when he said it. Instead, his eyes stayed fixed on the tracks, as though his father might appear at any moment. His voice was steady, but there was a tremor in it, one that only someone listening closely could catch. The soldier didn't answer right away. He let the boy's words settle, studying the small figure beside him. The boy's hands clutched the satchel so tightly it looked like part of him, his knuckles pale, his shoulders stiff. The soldier knew that kind of grip. He had seen it before. Men holding on to letters, photographs, anything that reminded them of home when the world around them was falling apart. After a long pause, the soldier leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. His voice was calm, almost careful. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" The boy nodded once. He didn't explain how long. He didn't need to. The soldier could see it in his tired eyes, in the way his legs dangled, numb from sitting too long on the wooden bench. "Does your dad know you're here?" the soldier asked gently. The boy hesitated, then shook his head. "No, but he told me he would come back, and this is where he said he'd be." His voice grew quieter. "So I have to wait." The soldier's chest tightened. He glanced down at the tracks, the cold iron stretching into the dark, and he thought about the countless promises made before men left for war. Promises whispered at kitchen tables, in crowded stations, on porches at night. Promises that were meant with all the heart in the world, but not all of them could be kept. The boy pulled his satchel onto his lap and fumbled with the zipper. Slowly, he reached inside and pulled out the folded piece of paper. His small fingers carefully unfolded it, smoothing out the creases. He held it out for the soldier to see. The soldier leaned closer. The handwriting was uneven, hurried, but the words were clear. "Wait at the station. I'll come back." The boy's eyes shone with something fierce as he clutched the note again. "See? He wrote it. He said he would come back. So I have to stay here until he does." The soldier stared at the words, his jaw tightening. He wanted to say something, but the right words didn't come. He remembered the faces of men who hadn't made it back, the letters they'd left behind, the children who would never see them step off a train. And now here was this boy, sitting alone, holding onto a promise like it was air. The soldier exhaled slowly. He shifted closer on the bench, lowering his voice. "Sometimes, waiting can be the hardest thing in the world. But you're brave for doing it. You're stronger than most people I know." The boy glanced up at him then, his eyes wide and searching. "Do you think he'll come back? My dad?" The question cut deep. The soldier wanted to give him the truth, but he also wanted to protect him from it. He studied the boy's face, the hope burning there, the trust that someone would keep their word. Finally, he answered carefully, "I think your dad loved you very much, enough to write that note, enough to make sure you knew he wanted to come back." The boy hugged the satchel to his chest again, processing the soldier's words. He didn't reply, but he didn't look away either. The silence between them stretched, filled with things neither of them could quite say. The soldier sat back slightly, his gaze still fixed on the boy. He knew this wasn't just about waiting anymore. It was about carrying something too heavy for someone so small. And he also knew that, whether the boy realized it or not, he wasn't waiting alone anymore. The soldier stayed seated beside the boy, the weight of silence stretching between them like the rails that ran endlessly into the distance. The boy rocked slightly on the bench, his small shoes brushing the iron bars beneath. His eyes kept darting toward the tracks, as if the next whistle would finally bring what he was waiting for. The soldier watched him quietly, then finally spoke, his tone softer now. "You know," the soldier began, "I used to wait too. Not here, not on this bench, but out there." He gestured vaguely, his hand pointing toward the horizon beyond the tracks. Every day I waited for something. Letters, news, anything that reminded me of home. The boy turned his head just enough to look at him, his expression cautious, as though deciding if the man's words were worth trusting. Sometimes the waiting was the hardest part, the soldier continued. You can fight through cold, hunger, and even fear, but waiting, that's different. It's like your heart stuck in a place where time doesn't move. The boy's brow furrowed, his lips pressing together. But if you stop waiting, he whispered, then what if you miss it? What if the person comes back and you're not here? The soldier nodded slowly. He understood that fear all too well. That's true. You don't want to miss them. But waiting doesn't always mean sitting in the same spot. Sometimes it just means holding on to the hope that they'll find you, no matter where you are. The boy frowned. But he told me to wait here. He wrote it. If I leave, I'll break the promise. His hands tightened on the satchel, his voice carrying a stubborn edge that masked the tremor underneath. The soldier leaned back slightly, thinking. He could see the weight of the boy's determination, how it gave him strength and yet tied him down. He respected it. But he also saw how fragile it was, how close it was to breaking. "What was your dad like?" the soldier asked. The boy blinked, caught off guard by the question. For the first time, his face softened. He was tall, strong. He used to put me on his shoulders so I could see everything, even when there were crowds. And he always laughed. He said he wanted me to be braver than him. The soldier felt his chest tighten. He didn't interrupt. The boy looked down at the satchel, his voice growing quieter. He gave me this bag before he left. He said it was mine now, that I should take care of it until he came back. So I keep it with me. Always. The soldier nodded, his gaze lingering on the boy's small hands gripping the worn fabric. He could almost picture the moment. The father kneeling down, handing over the satchel, pressing the note into his hand. A promise made in love, with no way of knowing what the future would hold. "I think your dad wanted you to have something to remind you of him," the soldier said softly. "Something to make you feel like he was close, even when he couldn't be." The boy's eyes flicked up again, shimmering with a mixture of hope and doubt. "Do you think he meant it? That he was really going to come back?" The soldier hesitated. His throat tightened, memories flashing, faces of men he had served with, the ones who had talked about home every night, the ones who had written letters they never got to deliver. He forced himself to answer carefully. "I believe he meant it with everything he had. Your dad wanted to be here more than anything." The boy looked down at the folded note again, running his fingers over the creases. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I'll keep waiting, even if it takes forever." The soldier exhaled, the weight of the boy's words pressing deep into him. He wanted to protect that hope, but he also knew the world didn't always honor such promises. Still, he stayed there, shoulder to shoulder with the boy, giving him something solid in the emptiness of the station. The trains kept coming and going. Passengers rushed past, voices echoing, luggage wheels clattering across the platform. But for the boy and the soldier, the world had narrowed to that one bench, that one conversation, and the promise that bound them both to the tracks stretching into the night. The boy sat quietly, his small hands folded on top of the satchel as though he were guarding something precious. The soldier remained beside him, his eyes watching the rails disappear into the darkness. For a long time, neither spoke. The sounds of the station filled the silence instead. The hum of lights overhead, the faint clatter of footsteps fading as the last of the passengers drifted away. the hollow whistle of another train in the distance. Finally, the soldier turned his head slightly. "You've been waiting for a while," he said gently. "Do you know when your dad told you he'd be back?" The boy hesitated, his lips pressed together as though he was keeping a secret, then slowly parted. "He said it wouldn't be long. He said the war would be over soon. And then he'd come back on the train, just like he left." His voice trembled, though he tried to make it sound strong. "I thought it would be just a few weeks, but it's been longer." The soldier's chest tightened at the word. He could hear the way the boy tried to stretch his belief across the gap of time, holding on to the promise even as the days turned into months. He recognized the weight of it. He had seen that weight carried by wives, mothers, and children who stood at stations just like this one, waiting for faces that never returned. The boy bent down and opened his satchel again. He pulled out the folded note, the same one he had shown before. He smoothed it against his knee with careful fingers, then spoke without looking at the soldier. "He wrote this the morning he left. He told me not to worry, that he would be back before I even noticed he was gone. And he said to wait here, because this is where he'd find me." The soldier's eyes dropped to the note. The handwriting was hurried, jagged in places, but full of determination. It was the kind of note written by someone desperate to give their child hope when they themselves had none. The boy's voice grew even softer. "At first, I thought he'd be here any day. I came to the station after school, every afternoon, then every weekend. And then I just kept coming. Because if I stop, then maybe I'll miss him. Maybe he'll come back and think I forgot." The soldier lowered his gaze, his jaw tightening. He could almost hear the voices of the men he had served with, talking about their children, about the promises they'd made to them before boarding transport trucks. He remembered their faces, their laughter, their fears, and he remembered the silence when some of them never returned. "You must love your dad a lot," the soldier said quietly. The boy nodded quickly, almost fiercely. "Of course I do. He's the best. He always kept his promises. Always. So this one has to be true, too." His voice faltered as he added, "Doesn't it?" The soldier felt the question land heavily. He turned toward the boy, meeting his eyes. "Your dad meant it," he said carefully. "When he told you to wait, he meant every word. He wanted more than anything to walk back onto this platform and see you here." The boy studied him, trying to read the truth in his expression. "Then why isn't he here yet?" The soldier swallowed hard. The question burned, because he knew the likely answer, but couldn't bring himself to break what little hope the boy still had. His voice was low, steady, almost like a whisper. "Sometimes the world doesn't let us keep the promises we make, even when we want to, even when we fight for it." The boy looked down at the note again, his shoulders curling forward. His small voice cracked as he whispered, "I've been waiting so long. What if he never comes back?" The soldier's hand twitched slightly, as though he wanted to reach out, but he stopped himself. He let the boy's words hang in the cold air before replying. "Then it doesn't mean he didn't love you. It just means he couldn't come back, no matter how badly he wanted to." The boy's eyes shimmered, though he didn't cry. Instead, he pressed the note against his chest, as though it could shield him from the truth. He sat like that for a long time, silent, his face turned toward the tracks. And the soldier sat with him, knowing that sometimes silence was the only answer a heart could bear. The soldier stayed quiet, watching the boy's small shoulders tense as he held the folded note against his chest. The boy didn't cry, not in the way most children might. His face was tight, his jaw set. his lips pressed together as if he was determined not to let a single tear fall. That determination was almost harder to look at than if he had broken down completely. The soldier shifted slightly on the bench, his boots scraping against the platform. "I knew men like your father," he said softly. "Men who talked about home every single day. Men who carried pictures in their pockets, who counted down the days until they could come back." The boy turned his head a little, his eyes searching the soldier's face. "They wanted nothing more than to step off a train one day and see their families waiting," the soldier continued. "Your dad would have been the same. I can promise you that." The boy's voice was barely above a whisper. "But some of them didn't come back, did they?" The soldier hesitated, his chest tightening. It was the question he had known would come, the truth that couldn't be avoided forever. He drew in a long breath before answering. "No," he admitted. "Not all of them could." The boy finally let his eyes drop, staring at the satchel in his lap. His small fingers traced the seams as though he could distract himself with the feel of the fabric. "So maybe my dad is one of them." His voice cracked. "Maybe he's not coming back." The soldier leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He wanted to choose his words carefully, but he also knew the boy deserved honesty. Sometimes war takes fathers away from their children. Sometimes it doesn't give them the chance to keep their promises, no matter how badly they wanted to. The boy bit down on his lip, his shoulders trembling. "I waited because I thought if I waited long enough, he'd come. That maybe he just needed more time." His breath hitched. "But what if I'm just waiting for nothing?" The soldier's throat tightened. He looked at the boy and saw more than just a child. He saw the weight of hope colliding with the edge of reality. "You're not waiting for nothing," he said firmly. "You're waiting because it's what he asked of you, because you loved him enough to keep the promise he left you. That's not nothing. That's everything." The boy blinked hard, his eyes shining, but the tears didn't fall. He gripped the satchel even closer, his knuckles white. "But if he's not coming back, then what am I supposed to do?" The soldier let the question settle, his own memories rising unbidden. He thought of the men who had fallen, of the letters he had carried home to families, of the way children had looked at him when he had to tell them their fathers weren't returning. He couldn't take away the boy's pain, but he could stand in the space it left behind. "You carry him with you," the soldier said quietly. "In your memories, in the things he gave you, in the strength he wanted you to have. You don't stop loving him just because he can't walk through those doors. Love doesn't end when someone's gone." The boy's lips parted, his breathing shaky. "Do you really believe that?" The soldier nodded slowly. "I've seen it. I've lived it. And I think your father wanted you to know that too." For a long moment, the boy didn't answer. He just stared down the empty tracks, his body still but his thoughts racing. Finally, he whispered, "I miss him so much." The soldier's hand moved slightly, hesitating before resting gently on the boy's shoulder. The boy didn't flinch. He leaned into the touch, just enough to show he needed it. The two of them sat there, side by side on the cold wooden bench. The station was nearly empty now, but the soldier stayed with him, steady and present. The boy was no longer waiting alone, and for the first time all day, the silence between them didn't feel unbearable. It felt like a place where the truth could exist, and where hope, though bruised, could still survive. The boy leaned into the soldier's steady hand, his small frame trembling, though he kept fighting to stay composed. The soldier didn't rush him, didn't push him to speak. He just sat quietly, letting the boy feel that he wasn't alone anymore. The platform was nearly empty now, the echo of footsteps fading, leaving only the hum of the lights and the distant rumble of trains that never seemed to bring the right one. After a while, the soldier reached into his own bag, his movements deliberate, almost hesitant. His fingers brushed against something inside, and he pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He held it carefully in his hands, staring at it for a moment before placing it on his lap. The boy glanced at it curiously, his brow furrowed. "What's that?" The soldier slowly unwrapped the cloth, revealing a medal. The metal glinted faintly under the harsh platform lights, its surface scratched and worn, but still shining with a weight that went beyond its appearance. Attached to the ribbon was a folded photograph, creased and weathered from years of being carried. The boy's eyes widened. He leaned forward, his breath catching. "That's my dad," he whispered. His small finger hovered just above the photograph, tracing the familiar smile in the picture. "That's him." The soldier nodded, his own voice quiet. "Yes, I served with him. We were in the same unit." The boy's eyes filled instantly, though he still fought not to let the tears spill. "You knew him?" "I did," the soldier said firmly. "He was a good man, brave, strong, but more than that, he never stopped talking about you. Every chance he got, he'd bring out that picture of you he kept folded in his pocket. He told us about the games you played, about how you laughed when he carried you on his shoulders. He was proud to be your dad." The boy pressed his lips together, his chin trembling. He touched the corner of the photograph as though it might vanish if he wasn't careful. "He really talked about me?" "All the time," the soldier replied. "When things were at their worst, when everyone else was thinking about how bad it was out there, he kept himself going by thinking about you. He said you were his reason to keep fighting." The boy looked down at the photograph again, silent for a long moment. His small shoulders shook, and this time he couldn't stop the tears from spilling down his cheeks. He tried to hide his face, pressing his forehead against the satchel, but the soldier stayed beside him, not turning away. The soldier's voice dropped lower, steady but heavy with emotion. "He wanted to come back to you. More than anything in the world, that's what he wanted. And when he couldn't, he asked me to make sure you knew how much he loved you." The boy slowly lifted his head, his eyes red and wet, but locked on the soldier's face. "He told you that?" The soldier nodded, his own throat tight. "Yes. He asked me to tell you he was proud of you, that he wanted you to be strong, and that even if he couldn't walk back into this station, his love for you never ended." The boy clutched the photograph now, holding it tightly with both hands. His tears fell freely, but there was something else in his face, too. A fragile comfort, a fragile piece of truth that gave him something to hold on to, besides the endless waiting. The soldier wrapped the medal and photograph back in the cloth, then pressed it gently into the boy's lap. "This belongs with you now," he said. "It's a part of him. And so long as you carry it, he'll always be with you." The boy looked down at the cloth bundle, his hands trembling as he held it. Slowly he whispered, "Thank you." The soldier placed a firm hand on his shoulder once more. "You don't have to keep waiting alone anymore. He wanted you to live, to keep going, not to stay stuck on this bench forever. You're not alone now." The boy nodded slowly, his tears still flowing but his grip on the medal steady. For the first time since he had started waiting, he felt as though someone truly understood what the promise had meant and why he had held on to it so tightly. And now he had something real to carry forward. Something that told him his father's love had reached him, even if his father never could. The boy held the cloth bundle close, his fingers trembling as he clutched the medal and photograph the soldier had given him. His tears were still fresh, but his grip had changed. Less desperate now, more certain, as though he finally had something real to carry instead of only hope. The station around them had grown quiet, the crowd long gone, leaving behind the soft hum of the lights and the faint echo of the rails stretching into the night. The soldier shifted on the bench, his voice low and steady. "It's late. You shouldn't stay here any longer. Your dad wouldn't want you waiting in the cold like this." The boy hesitated, his eyes darting toward the tracks once more. For a moment, he looked torn between the promise he had made to himself and the new truth that weighed in his hands. "But if I leave," he whispered, "what if he comes back? What if this was the night?" The soldier's chest tightened at the words. He leaned forward, resting one heavy hand gently on the boy's shoulder. If he were able to, he would already be here. And if somehow he could walk off that train tonight, I think he'd want to find you safe at home, not out here alone. The boy blinked, his eyes red, his lip quivering. Slowly he nodded, though his grip on the satchel and bundle remained firm. It was as if agreeing to leave meant letting go of part of the waiting, and that wasn't easy. The soldier stood, his boots scraping against the worn wooden planks of the platform. He extended his hand, palm open, steady and patient. "Come on. Let me walk you home." The boy stared at the hand for a long moment. His small fingers tightened around the photograph one last time. Then, with a shaky breath, he reached out. His hand slipped into the soldier's, small and fragile, but it held on. Together, they walked across the empty platform. The boy's steps were hesitant at first, his head turning back once more to look at the tracks. But the soldier gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, and slowly the boy looked forward again. The night air outside the station was crisp and cold, carrying the faint smell of coal and smoke. The soldier adjusted his pace to match the boy's shorter stride, his presence solid and protective. They walked in silence, the only sound the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel path. For the first time, the boy didn't feel invisible. People had rushed past him all day, but now someone was walking beside him, someone who understood what he had been waiting for and what it had cost. The soldier glanced down at him, his voice quiet but certain. "Your dad would be proud of you. Not just because you waited, but because you had the courage to keep believing. That's something not many can do." The boy didn't answer right away. He held the medal and photograph close, his free hand gripping the soldier's tightly. Finally he whispered, "I'll still miss him. Every day." The soldier nodded. "You should. Missing someone means they mattered. And he mattered." The boy's throat tightened, but he nodded too. For the first time, the thought didn't feel unbearable. It still hurt, but now it felt like something he could carry, because he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. As they left the station behind, the boy glanced back one last time. The platform was empty, the tracks stretching into the distance. He knew he wouldn't sit on that bench again waiting for a face that would never appear. Instead, he carried his father with him, in the medal, in the photograph, and in the stories the soldier had shared. And as the soldier led him down the quiet road toward home, the boy felt a fragile but certain truth take root inside him. His father might never walk off a train, but he was not alone. Not anymore. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.